Welcome to Blackhawks Insider, the official podcast of the Chicago Blackhawks, presented by Chevy Drives Chicago.com. Drive what Kane and Taves drive. What a big week for the Blackhawks, in particular the two cornerstones of the franchise, Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane. Kaylee Chelios and I dive into some of those hot button topics, and we also sit down with Blackhawks assistant coach Kevin Dean. Coach Dean is in his first season with the Blackhawks. He came over from the Boston Bruins. He also played for the Blackhawks at the end of his NHL career and is in control of the defense for the Hawks this season. He's also a great guy off the ice, and we think his personality will carry through on the show for you today. Of course, we have Sellies and Chirps to wrap things up, so thanks for dropping by the Blackhawks Insider Podcast. And welcome to the show. I'm Chris Vosters, joined by Kaylee Chelios this week. Kaylee, there's never a dull moment covering the NHL, especially in season, but holy cow, as far as the Blackhawks were concerned, what a week for Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane. Of course, they are mentioned together seemingly always, but And so maybe it was fitting that on Sunday they were both featured prominently in top headlines, not just for the Blackhawks, but across the NHL, but for two completely different reasons. And the contrast was stark because on the one hand, you had this very somber announcement from Blackhawks captain Jonathan Taves, where he announced he was still battling issues from his chronic immune syndrome and was going to have to step away from the team to work on his health. And then on the opposite end, you had Patrick Kane deliver a virtuoso performance in the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, where he had a hat trick in a win over the Leafs in that original six matchup that was sold out, by the way, at the United Center. So, oh my goodness, a lot going on. Pick either Taves or Kane, but what was your takeaway from the big news involving the Blackhawks legends?
So I'll start with the more encouraging, which would be Patrick Kane scoring a hat trick back on home ice after a very long road trip and having just played Toronto. You know, they played Patrick Kane tight. I mean, they were on him in twos and threes, contained him, took away time and space. They were a lot to handle offensively for the Blackhawks that game, and played just a great game Toronto did in their own barn. So to see Patrick Kane, I mean, if you were sleeping on him at all or you had any question marks as to where his game was, he just very kindly reminded you why he's among one of the best players in the world. I came in this season, and I remember Pat Boyle from NBC Sports Chicago asked me who my big ticket player was, and I had said it's always been Patrick Kane for me. Just the way his deception, he outsmarts everybody, and at 34 years old, you know what you're getting when he's on the ice, and yet you're never prepared for it. He's just 2, 3, 4 steps ahead sometimes compared to everybody. So to see him come back, right before the trade deadline and score a hat trick in that fashion, 3 different goals. Credit to Domi too. He had a great game. They've had chemistry throughout the season, but to put on a show like that against the Toronto Maple Leafs was incredibly exciting, impressive. If you're a Blackhawks fan, that's got to be a game if you went there that you're going to remember and that stands out to you because it potentially could be his last. We don't know, or it could have been his last. And so that to me was really impressive, Chris. What were your thoughts watching Patrick Kane up close and personal this year? That game probably in that moment had to stand out to you for sure. Yeah,
it was just, again, in my first year with the organization, I'm learning a ton, and this just felt like the vintage Patrick Kane performance, and not just the hat trick, but also on the stage that he was on Sunday night. It's a sellout crowd, over 19,000 pack in the United Center. It's an original six matchup, Sunday night showdown. I mean, it's not just the pure numbers for Patrick Kane. It's the games in which he delivers these performances, whether it's in matchups like on Sunday or in decisive playoff games, in games that win the organization Stanley Cup. So it was a great, I guess, window into why he means so much to the fans. And I was I heard people flew into town for this game, and not Maple Leafs fans either, but Blackhawks fans from across the United States and even in Canada flew into Chicago for this game to see Patrick Kane. So it never ceases to amaze me, the pull that he has on hockey fans, especially Blackhawks fans, of course. But what a performance and what a night. And he's gotten going lately. I mean, 9 goals in his first 50 games, and then over a 2-game span between the Ottawa Senators game and that Maple Leafs game on Sunday, he racked up 5 goals. So you just never know. It's been a tough season for him for a lot of reasons on and off the ice, but he still got that it factor, and it was really cool to see that on display in the Maple Leafs game.
Especially since, too, having just been in Toronto media was speculating there's potential for Patrick Kane to join the Leafs, and he quickly sort of put an end to that when asked about it post-game, as far as how close that was actually, to coming true, which it was not. And so just on top of that, too, adding fuel to the fire, that wasn't going to happen, but here's what you're missing in case it was. And he puts up that kind of performance at this point in the season. If you're Toronto, you're not, and this is no disrespect for the Blackhawks, but that's a game where you come in. I know they're still playing a second half to back-to-back, but it's a game where you want to at least get a point out of against this team. And the Hawks just great performance, well coached, and it wasn't just Kane too. I loved what Cole Gutman did, getting his first NHL goal in that fashion. It's one to remember.
Great point on the call out for Cole Gutman. Exactly, first career NHL goal. I think in a way, though, because Kane and Taves are so intertwined, that having Kane put up a hat trick in the way that he did, it was made more emotional, I thought, by the news from Jonathan Taves the same day that he was stepping away from the team, still dealing with symptoms of long COVID and chronic immune response syndrome, acknowledging how challenging it's been for him, physically, of course, but also mentally, to not be able to have his body do the things that he's accustomed to it doing on the ice. And just such an emotional roller coaster of a day. It kind of blew my mind that both of those things happened in the same 24-hour span. But, Kaylee, I think Kyle Davidson, the Blackhawks general manager, said it best, that anything other than Jonathan Taves' health right now is secondary. And just I really feel for the guy on a personal note, independent of what he's done for the organization or who he is, just human to human. You feel bad for the guy that he's going through something like this. And he means just as much to the organization as Patrick Kane does, and certainly wishing him nothing but the best, and not ruling anything out either. Hoping that he can still come back and play in some games before this season ends.
Yeah, I'm with you on the personal level, and I really respect the way Kyle Davidson and the management have handled that whole situation, and humanizing it and putting everything into perspective. His health is the most important thing. So moving forward, like you said, hopefully we do get to see Jonathan Taves come back, but it's, you just feel for him. Like you said, the mental side of it. Last season, at the end of the season, I remember him saying this is probably the most challenging season of my career. And at times later on, he'd said, I still feel like I have some of the best hockey left in me. So having to fight with that side of it, and his body just not being able to be where maybe his mindset is as far as where he wants to be in his career at this point. He's given so much to this organization. He's brought so much success, future Hall of Famer, one of the greatest captains. It's just so sad, like you said, to see him at this point struggling to find his game and get healthy. That's kind of been the case for him all season, is managing this, chronic syndrome that he has, immune syndrome, and battling through that. None of us really know what he's going through or what it's like on a day-to-day basis. So it is emotional. On one hand, like you said, it was exciting that the Blackhawks put up one of their best performances, and Patrick Kane had a historic night and one of his best games of the season. And on the other side, it's sad to see that Jonathan Taves couldn't be a part of that, and we'll just have to, it remains to be seen, wait and see if he's able to make a healthy return. And who knows? It could take another year before he really starts to feel like himself. It doesn't seem like he's really come back to, his pre-illness form in any way, shape, or form yet.
Well, for a lot of reasons, Sunday's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, one of the signature games of the season for the Blackhawks. And Kaylee, that was something that you brought up with our guest on this episode, assistant coach Kevin Dean, who is handling the defense specifically for the Blackhawks. I've really enjoyed getting to know Kevin Dean over the course of this season. He's been really nice, very welcoming, really funny as well. I think his demeanor suits this team very, very well. And it's been fun getting to know members of his family also as they've come through Chicago throughout the course of the season. So I really enjoyed not just the players, but the coaching staff as well, Kaylee. And I really enjoyed our conversation with Kevin today. Hey, Coach, welcome to the Blackhawks Insider Podcast. It's great to have you. You're such a popular guy. I mean, have you done a lot of podcasts in the past?
I don't think I've ever done a podcast. I listen to podcasts, but I've never been a part of a podcast, no.
Really? So we're breaking ground here. This is Coach Kevin Dean's first ever podcast appearance. Well, it's great to have you. How's the season going? You were brought in specifically to handle the defense for head coach Luke Richardson, and we're about coming up on the 2/3, 3/4 mark of the season right now. You're first in Chicago. How's everything going?
It's been going great. I've really enjoyed the season to this point. I was telling, I went home on Saturday after we got home, saw my parents a bit, and I was telling them it's just been really enjoyable. It's a totally different feel than where I was coming from, but, the people here are so great. From Kyle on down to every trainer and doctor we, are flying with it, you guys, the media, everyone. That's just been a really enjoyable year. You're not living and dying with every win or loss, so you're kind of looking at a bigger picture. It's a different focus, but really enjoyable.
Kaylee, we just keep having guests with Wisconsin ties on the Blackhawks Insider Podcast. Kevin Dean, a proud native of Madison, Wisconsin. Coach, I grew up in Brookfield. Kaylee's mom is from Wisconsin. Of course, her dad played at the UW. So I don't know. It's kind of weird how this chain of guests keeps rolling through, Kaylee.
Only the best make it to the league. That's what I'm understanding. They're all coming from Wisconsin. And Kevin, how is it being closer to home? Milwaukee, where you grew up, you have 4 kids, a family. How excited was your family when you got the call from Luke to be able to join the Blackhawks organization? And you played for them back in 99, 2000.
Yeah, really excited. My parents, they're from Madison, and my wife's parents are from Green Bay. So, my wife, we have one daughter who's 17, who's still in high school out in Boston area. So my wife's coming out. She's been great. She's come out, I think, 8 or 9 times already. So she's coming out a lot. And when she does come home, she gets to go see her parents. I get to go see my parents on days off, probably once or twice a month. So it's been a really good fit as they get older to go and see them and help them out and take down their Christmas decorations, whatever it is. So that's been great. My family, they love, we spend a week or probably 2 or 3 weeks in Wisconsin every summer. My kids are kind of ensconced there too, and they love the fact that I'm here. They're close to their cousins and grandparents, so it's a good fit.
One thing that we like to ask people on the podcast, coaches, is their favorite Chicago restaurant. I don't think I need to ask you that. I think I already know. It's got to be Club Lucky, right? I ran into you there with your wife, Jill, a couple of weeks ago, as a matter of fact. It's one of my favorite restaurants in Chicago. Is Club Lucky number one?
I don't know if it's number one. It's probably my favorite Italian place at this point. I haven't been to a ton of Italian places. I love, speaking of Italian, a pizzeria, what's it called? It's down there on the river.
Pizzeria Uno?
No, I'll think of it. That place is real good. It's right in the river, right by RPM Seafood. And then Smith & Walensky for steak I like.
Okay.
Steak's kind of my go-to favorite, so I kind of tilt that way just a little bit. But I got the pizzeria.
Pizza Portofino?
Portofino, that's it. Okay. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, love that place. So I can walk to those places, so I love it.
Well, shout out to our producer Trevor Bray for the call out there, and Coach Trevor knows her pizzerias in Chicago, so she helped us out with that one there. Yeah. Listen, you had a long run in Boston as a coach on their staff for many years. How did this opportunity come about in Chicago? I mean, when did you realize that this was an opportunity for you?
Well, I got let go in Boston, not long after we got eliminated from the playoffs. So I immediately started doing some homework and who was going to be looking for some coaches. I was making my calls, and someone, I don't know who it was, said, "Well, we think Luke's got a leg up in Chicago. Not going to be announced for a couple of weeks." So as soon as it was announced, I called Luke, and he seemed very interested out of the gate. And as I was, just because I never met Luke, but I heard terrific things about him, which have all been true. And like I said, the geographical location, with Madison and my wife in Green Bay, it was a perfect fit, and I was really excited when things started to develop there.
Kevin, you've been a part of two very cool, franchises so far, but coaching the Blackhawks this season in a rebuild, how much of what you taught, your philosophies with what you did in Providence and with Boston and the Bruins kind of translated to being in a rebuild and being in this situation with the Hawks? Because Luke has said, it's not necessarily a young team, it's just a new team. So you're dealing with players who are at a lot of different stages in their careers and not necessarily young prospects the way you could develop like a Charlie McAvoy or a Brandon Carlo. So what transitioned well, and what did you learn coming to the Hawks this season?
Well, I think, my time in Boston, I think what really kind of strikes me is I think you take a player, any player's got strengths, that's why they're in the NHL. And I think you have to make sure that they continue to play to those strengths. Ian Mitchell is a good puck mover. Like Ian Mitchell has to move pucks to play in the league, to be effective, right? And, Jake McCabe's hard to play against. He's prickly and he's a good defender. So he has to continue to do that. And same with Connor Murphy, right? But, then you try to kind of supplement whatever each player is missing, and you try to just chip away at what their weaknesses are. So they're doing what they're doing well, and they continue to do that well. But then you hopefully improve on what the few things that they're not great at, and then so hopefully you develop into a complete player. That being said, like you said, we're not a real young group back there in the back end. So that is a little bit complicated. Jack Johnson's learning curve isn't going to be the same as Ian Mitchell's or Isaac Phillips, right? So, I know that, and so I probably do spend a little more time with Isaac and Ian because I think they have more, certainly not room to grow, but they're earlier in their career, so they're going to be a little bit more receptive, I think, and it's a little easier to change. So focus a little bit more on the younger kids, and then in the next few years when these kids start to roll through here, I think it's going to be, more work than this year because they are going to be a younger group, I think, as, the years come up here, and just really focusing on the details, becoming a good pro, how important practice is, stick position angles. It's all, cumulative, but, just chip away because, we're not trying to build Rome in a day, but, it's a process and it's going to take years. And, these kids come in at 20, 19, 20 years old, whatever it is, that, hopefully by the time they're 23, 24, they're really good players. And that starts from day one.
What's the biggest key to improvement as an NHL player? I mean, you talk about how a player who's 30 is not quite as malleable as a player who's 21 or 22 or, in the age range of an Isaac Phillips or an Ian Mitchell. So when you've got a guy who comes in that's a little more moldable, what does he need to do to make sure that he can stay in the NHL?
Well, I think what I touched on before is continue to do what got you there. So that's the first thing. And then I think practice. I think becoming a good pro is, some kids are a little more ingrained with it, a little more in tune with it. Other kids are, I party a little bit more. I'm coming from a college atmosphere, whatever it might be. They need to understand how difficult it is to be a good pro. There's nutrition, there's rest, there's hydration, practice habits. That all is cumulative, right? So they need to, I think, you need to impress upon, listen, we're only going to practice for 45 minutes. Let's not spend the first 20 minutes warming up because, you've lost half your practice, right? So, maybe you get in the gym, get on the bike for 10 minutes before practice, you hit the ice at practice, you're ready to roll. Now you're not wasting any time warming up, you're ready to go. I think that's a big part of it. I think understanding your identity as a player is important, and not that you're going to be pigeonholed into, being a, Isaac Phillips, a good example. He's kind of a steady stay-at-home defenseman now. He doesn't need to be in 5 years, but to play every night, he's going to have to at least be reliable to stay in the lineup, right? And he has been. He was when he played. So and then from there he can grow his game into maybe a little bit more offensive flair now and again. So there's some tricks to staying in the lineup, but I think it's having an identity that you can relate to that the team needs, and then continue to develop every day through practice and good habits and understanding what it takes to be a pro.
How do you keep the room so positive? It seems like the team, night in, night out, wins, losses, they're always playing to the final seconds. As a coaching staff, how often are you concentrated on making sure that it's still a great day to be in the NHL, come to the rink? What sort of things do you guys do as a staff to keep the group engaged and kind of give some perspective when things get tough during the dog days?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think it starts with Luke. I think Luke's very calm. He's very positive. He sets a really good tone every day. He doesn't get too anxious or excited when things aren't going well. So I think he's a good, steady influence there. And I think the players do understand the situation a little bit. And I think, myself, Derek Plant, Derek King, Luke, Jimmy, we're all pretty similar. I mean, you guys know us a little bit. I don't think any of us are, snap shows. We're all pretty positive on a day-to-day basis. So I think the players understand that, and there's no one breathing down their neck all the time. Sure, there's some accountability for sure, but it's not from a negative point of view, and I think the players appreciate that, and they're playing, whether we're good enough on certain nights, I don't know. Obviously, you're not. No one is in the NHL, but I think for the most part, guys, I really hand it to the team and the leaders. They're not quitting. They're playing hard every night, and I do see growth in our team from October for sure.
Just on that, where does the win against Toronto, Patrick Kane's hat trick, rank this season for you guys? And I mean, it could be easy to get down on yourself sometimes and the wins aren't coming, but where does that win rank, and how exciting it was, the Madhouse, for you as a coach in your first year here?
It's probably, honestly, it might be the top win for me. The win in New York was great. I thought the wins the win against Anaheim with all the dads was great. Tenorti scoring a couple goals, but last night, and I haven't been around Patrick Kane that much, but I certainly am aware of how terrific of a player he is. To see him perform like that last night in front of a big crowd, as the deadline gets close against Toronto, scored 3 goals in a row for us. It was special, and he's a pretty, you guys know him. He's not a real loud guy. He's a quiet leader. So when you see him have those kind of nights, it's kind of fun to just step back and watch it happen.
Defenseman scoring goals, Coach. We certainly love it. You mentioned the 2 goals that Jared Tenorti had in Anaheim. That was great. Does that give you do you throw your chest out a little bit among the rest of the coaches when the defensemen put a few in?
No, I don't know if I do that. I'm happy for those guys because I think we got a group of defensemen that really care about defense and defense first. And so when they can get a goal, I think it's great. Seth got hot there for a little bit a couple weeks ago. Tenorti when he scored those goals. I love it when the D score. Connor Murphy last night on, I think it was Kane's 3rd goal. He got up, had a good look from the slot, kind of got hooked, but the fact that he got up, this day and age in the NHL, it's important that defensemen are part of the attack, and they're continuing to get up. We had a burp, I think, maybe in Montreal or something. We had a D get caught a couple times, but overall, our D are trying to get involved in the offense, which is sometimes it's clunky, but they're doing a good job. They're getting up, they're contributing to get points. Jake McCabe's having a pretty good year point-wise. He's, scruffed out a couple points in Ottawa. That was a good win. Good play at the end of the game to step on the guy. So I get excited when the guys score just for them more than I don't stick my chest out, so to speak. But Kinger's always Kinger. Out every period, let's get the D going, the D stink. He's just kidding and says it. But so when they do score, he looks down at me and just kind of smiles. So it's fun.
Well, and that was a total question and jest as well, and you handled it very well. Looking at your career in the NHL, you played over 330 games. Ultimately, a heart condition forced you to step away from the playing side of the game. Did your exit as a player influence your decision to get into coaching in any way?
I don't know. That's a good question. I never thought of it that way. It probably did because quite honestly, I think I was probably done in the NHL. I was kind of a 6th, 7th defenseman anyways, and my heart flared up, and I was 31 years old at the time, so I was probably done in the NHL. I maybe could have got a couple call-ups. But then my heart did flare up, and it was kind of more of an annoyance than a real threat. So I think I ended up probably quitting hockey 2 or 3 years before I wanted to, and because of that, I think I had some passion to coach, and I made some calls. Didn't happen for a few years, and then I got a call from Lou Lamoriello in
Coaches in the dark.
New Jersey.
The lights went out.
Yeah. So I think it did, because I ultimately probably did affect it, because I think I ended up retiring a couple of years before I really wanted to.
Towards the end of your career, you played for the Blackhawks. What stands out to you about your time as a Hawk then and a player at that time that you remember, you think of now in your role as a coach?
Well, it's pretty similar to the situation we're going through right now. We weren't very good. I got traded here, and we had a little bump at the deadline because they moved some guys out, moved some guys in, and I think just there's a little more energy. Played all right. The next year was a tough year. And so it's a little bit similar to this, and I liken it. The next year, 2 or 3 years after I left, they drafted, I think Keith, Taves, and Kane. And, look what happened, right? So that was kind of the start of it. So I kind of look back and think of that. I always remember the city. Like, even then, the crowds were good in Chicago. Great place to play. It's the best sports town in the world, I think, when they got some good teams, and even when they don't. So that's a real credit to the fans here. And it makes it a fun place to play and a fun place to live.
Coach, we had Sam Lafferty on the Blackhawks Insider podcast earlier this season, and we were talking about his abilities as a golfer. And, quite frankly, Sam told us after the show that we could have turned the entire episode into a golf podcast if we wanted. He's that passionate about the sport. You went to the University of New Hampshire, and from what I understand, you had to make a choice between hockey or golf as well. Have you kept up on your game at the links?
Not really, no. I've kind of lost my passion for golf. I don't know if I had a choice. I was a pretty good golfer. If I would have really committed to golf, I might have been able to play, after college, but I certainly would have been starting in the mini tours, and probably the lower mini tours, to be honest with you. But I had some talent at golf. I did not have the temperament for it. I was a completely snap show, and I couldn't process bad shots, like how I could hit one good and the next shot bad. Like, it just didn't resonate with me at all. So I would snap, and I would just completely lose it. So I did not have the mentality to play professional golf, but I enjoyed it. I did go to UNH, played there on the golf team for 4 years. Incidentally, one of my teammates, who was like third or fourth guy on our team, ended up playing the Masters one year. He turned into a real good player, and we were not a good team. New Hampshire, as you can imagine, is not a great golf team. But our number 3 guy for most of my 4 years ended up playing in the Masters, believe it or not. So I always say that we must not have been too bad. But I enjoy the game. I just haven't played a lot. Having 4 kids, and like I said, my nature and my disposition is to get frustrated out there. So it kind of got away from me the last 5 or 10 years.
Does the movie Happy Gilmore have a particular resonance with you?
Well, I'd like to watch it, but it doesn't resonate with me anyway. But I do enjoy it. It's a good movie to watch. Adam Sandler's always entertaining.
Would you if you had to pick a favorite sports movie, what would it be?
Oh boy, probably Bull Durham. I think.
Okay.
Slapshot.
Interesting.
I mean, I love Slapshot. The more you watch it, you pick up something every time.
Yes.
It's a little different that you kind of clue into. Like, oh, that's pretty clever. But
Did you let your kids watch Slapshot?
Yeah, I watched it last summer with my 18-year-old Charlie, and he and I were laughing. So
I was gonna say because it was rated R. I was not allowed to watch it until I was an older teenager.
Yeah, it's pretty clean though, isn't it, compared to nowadays what they're making?
Oh yeah,
yeah, it's great. It's a great movie.
Interesting to hear you throw Bull Durham in there, though. That's an ultimate classic, but a baseball movie. I was thinking we'd get hockey or golf, and you did mention Slapshot, but Bull Durham's a classic too.
Is there any hockey movies other? I mean, there's the one with Rob
Mighty
Lowe,
Ducks.
Yeah, Mighty Ducks. Yeah, I don't know if I even ever saw that, to be honest with you.
Oh,
there's Miracle.
You got to do some film.
Miracle's good. Yeah, Miracle's good. Well, and Kaylee might appreciate this. So I grew up in Madison, and I literally, and Bruce Cassidy, when I worked with him the last 10 years, thought I was the biggest idiot in the world because I did not grow up watching any pro hockey. Like, we did not get any pro hockey in Madison. Blackhawks weren't on. We didn't have cable growing up. So I thought the University of Wisconsin and Chris Chelios and those guys were the best hockey players in the world. And turns out some of them were, like Chris and those guys. So I would go to these games, and I thought that was the ultimate pinnacle you could get to in hockey. I didn't even when I went to high school, I hardly knew about the NHL. I'd see a couple of games on USA, started putting games, but I just liked to play. I never really watched it. And like Butch would say, well, who's this guy or this guy? I'm like, I've never heard of that guy. He said, well, he's a Hall of Famer. Played probably, retired 3 years before I started playing. I've never even heard of him. So
It's amazing you went to the NHL, but I can say, and I know Chris can say too, there's a special place in my dad's heart for Madison, Badger hockey, and that entire experience for him at that time growing up and before NCAA rules and how cool it really was. Like, playing to be a Badger and to have that kind of dynamic with the city, the community, and Wisconsin's such a fun place to be around if you're a sports fan.
And they were so good for it seemed like the time I was about 8 to the time I went away to high school, they were like top 5 every year. So it was just fun environment to go to a game, great players. They would go on, they were playing the NHL, but it was just a great environment to be around, like you said.
Is there a rivalry between University of New Hampshire and Vermont? Just bordering states. Is there bad blood there?
I don't think so. I don't know if it's bad blood. I think there used to be when the teams were better. I think the teams now are kind of down. I think, in order to have a rivalry, someone's got to be good, right? And those teams have been down for a while. Like maybe when Sharpie was there, I bet you UNH was pretty good. Because they did get good for a while in the mid to late 90s. I don't know what years he was there. But I think lately, UNH and Vermont are just trying to keep their heads above water. So I don't think they're too worried about each other as much. But Vermont's a beautiful place, and it's a great school. It's a great campus. They're very similar schools, the way they look. When you're on campus and you walk around, they're kind of a lot of woods around and beautiful places. But I don't know if there's a bad blood there, though.
I've got it here. Sharpie at the U of Vermont, 2000 to 2002. I tell you what, talking to Patrick Sharp, I mean, you'd never guess that Vermont was maybe below the waterline a little bit as a hockey program. I mean, the way he sells that school, he's like their number one recruiter or something like that. So, but I was just fishing for any kind of nuggets that we can surprise Sharpie with on the broadcast. But thank you, Coach. We appreciate it. Listen, I'm an avid Toyota Camry owner and driver, and I got the hybrid, and I hear you're a Camry owner as well, but yours has got some mileage on it, right?
Yeah, I don't know how. I'm thinking it's getting close to 200,000. I don't know. It's probably on there. I haven't looked. But yeah, my mom and dad, they're in their 80s. They have a 2-car garage, and I guess every time they want to take the trash out, they have to move one of the cars out because you can't get the trash can by the back of the car, right? Which I understand. And like I said, they're 84. My dad had a fall a couple years ago, so they have a hell of a time doing it. It takes probably 15 minutes to, get in the car, move it back, move the trash out, move the car back.
There's snow outside. You don't want to paint. Yeah.
Right. So he calls me and he's kind of sheepishly, he's like, would you mind driving my car? And I have a Suburban. So I don't want to drive a Suburban in Chicago, right? I'm like, absolutely. So I've been driving that car in the summer for years. It's a great little car, zips around, it's in good shape. The only problem is I think it's getting so old that the lights, like the headlights, the plastic is like tinted yellow. So I don't know. I'm going to get pulled over before too long because the cops are like, your lights aren't on. But it's been great. It's worked out well for my parents and me.
What year is it, did you say?
I think it's an 05.
An 05? Nice. Yeah. I grew up. It's hilarious. I grew up in a family of Camrys. My parents always had one, just like lying around basically, and so it was the first car that I bought as well. And I'd love to get 200,000 on it. That's what you get with a Camry. You get a long shelf life. Yeah. But
it's a great little car. It's inexpensive to fix for the most part, right? So.
All right. Well, if you see the 05 Camry on the streets of Chicago, give it a beat. It's probably Kevin Dean.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good car.
Kevin, on that, do you remember, just quickly, I want to do a speed round with you and get to know you a little bit better in the coaching staff, but do you remember what your first big purchase was getting into the league for the first time? A lot of guys, it's a car, and I thought maybe this Camry came from all the way back then. But if not, what was your first big time purchase that you were proud of?
I bought a watch. I bought a watch that I had my eye on. A couple guys that I had been playing with. So when I made the team, got called up my first year. Next year, I made the team out of training camp, and I bought myself a nice watch.
Oh, good for you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I hope you didn't lose
Still
it.
have
You
it.
still have it? Good.
No, I still have it. Still works. I don't know if it fits on my arm anymore, but I'll have to try. I haven't worn it. No one wears watches anymore because we all have phones now, right? So
True.
point.
True. Especially younger guys. I remember when they've tried to look at, the time for the bus. And if there's an analog clock in a locker room, it takes them an extra 15, 20 seconds to figure out how much
I believe
time.
that. I believe that.
All right, Kevin, speed round. We have about 6 or 7 questions that we want to get through just to get to know you a little bit better and the coaching staff. So you guys are all new. You seem like a close group. I'm going to start with number 1. Who's the funniest?
Derek King.
Now he's funnier than you. I was gonna say. I mean, it's you guys both have a good sense of humor, but that you quickly mentioned Kinger as the funniest. Huh?
Yes, yeah, no question. You're not talking looks, right? You're just talking.
Not the funniest.
Yeah, okay.
I guess the best one-liners might have been a better way to put that.
Yeah, he's got a lot of them. He's got a lot of them.
Kinger. Okay, the chattiest.
I would think if you asked everybody, they'd probably say me.
I've heard that
But
before.
yeah, oh no.
In a good
All right, I
way.
got to tone it down. I got to tone it down.
I know nothing.
Most caffeinated.
Probably Kinger. Derek King.
Really?
Again.
Okay.
Yep.
Earliest riser.
Luke.
Luke.
I think there's a lot of guys get up early. All these guys that live in the suburbs, Matt Meacham and Adam Gill and Derek Plant, Derek King, they all get up early and commute in. But I'll give it to Luke because he's actually getting off the bike by about 7 in the morning or getting done with his workout. So whether you're in a car or working out, I think you need to tilt towards the workout. So he gets that one.
Good for him. Okay, best music playlist.
Derek King.
What's on it?
It's a lot of what I like is 70s kind of rock, the Stones, Marshall Tucker, stuff like that.
Zeppelin?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Least tech savvy.
Probably Luke.
Oh, really?
Any good stories on that?
I don't know any stories. I just he's actually pretty tech savvy. I think the whole group is pretty tech savvy.
Yeah.
But I'd say he's probably the least.
So he's not the guy handing the tablet to the players when they come off the bench. Put it that way.
No, and he doesn't ask them, Matt and Adam a lot for help, but probably a little bit more than the other guys. But that just makes sense. Yes.
Well, thanks, Coach. We really appreciate the time and for going along with us like this. It's been just to echo kind of what we said at the top of the show. It's been great for us, Kaylee and I, and Colby as well, being around this team. We've really enjoyed the vibe that the coaching staff has set down. You're super easy to be around and super great to us on the broadcast side as well. So thanks for coming on the Blackhawks Insider Podcast. You've got an open invite to come back anytime you want. We got to get your podcast reps up, Coach. But
yeah, first one
thanks
ever,
a lot.
So.
Thanks a lot.
We
for
feel the
stopping
same.
by.
Thank you, and we feel the same with you guys. You guys, are easy to be around, easy to work with. Look forward to traveling with you guys, and see you tomorrow night.
All right, our thanks once again to assistant coach Kevin Dean, and let's get into Sellies and Chirps. Just a quick one today with just me and Kaylee on the horn with you, but I'll start, Kaylee. And last weekend was the NBA All-Star Game in Salt Lake City, Utah, and LeBron James, of course, recently became the NBA's all-time leading scorer and performed at the All-Star Game as well, and was asked post-game about sort of along the lines of post-playing career, interests after he stops playing. Would he like to be an owner someday, and of an NBA team, that is? And he responded that he would love to be an owner of an NBA team someday and bring a championship to another city as an owner, the way he has as a player. And he specifically mentioned the city of Las Vegas as a destination for an NBA team and an NBA team that he would like to own. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has mentioned expansion into Las Vegas, back to Seattle. So there's a bit of a buzz going on around the NBA coming to Las Vegas and joining the NFL and the NHL, of course. So LeBron is mentioning that Vegas is a good sports city and mentioned the Las Vegas Aces, the WNBA team, the Raiders, and then he mentioned the hockey team in Vegas as well and the winning track record that they had. And then he went on to say the name of the hockey team in Vegas, which he called the Kings. Now, wait a second. The Kings are the hockey team in Los Angeles. The Golden Knights play in Vegas. And so you could tell, like, wheels were spinning a little bit. He wasn't sure, wait, are they the Vegas Kings? And so he kind of asked the reporters in a weird role reversal, hey, like, are they the Kings? And then someone said, no, they're actually the Golden Knights. And then he said, oh, yeah, that's right, the Golden Knights. And then a pause. The Kings are in L.A., right? He said. And it's like, dude, the Kings play in the same arena you play in with the Lakers. They play in formerly the Staples Center, now Crypto.com Arena. It's like there are banners hanging for Wayne Gretzky and the Kings in Crypto.com Arena. How are you even uncertain that the Kings are LA's team? I mean, it was pretty wild. So, Selly or chirp, I mean, at least he knew there was a hockey team in Vegas. He knows that they're successful. That's why the NBA wants to get in on the Vegas fun. But, bro, how do you not know about the Kings playing in your own building?
I think it all went downhill when he got tripped up about the Vegas Golden Knights, which, like, in fairness, they're the Vegas Golden Knights, not like the Knights. Like, people make mistakes on their name quite a bit, so maybe it just put him on a rough road to have success. But I'm totally chirping that. That is so offensive. The King doesn't know the Kings play, like in the same arena. So it's hard to imagine that slipped his mind while he got confused about Vegas. So I'm definitely chirping that. Like, I know Kaner has mentioned that LeBron is a player who he really respects and, admires from one athlete to another. I think he needs to have a little one-on-one with Kaner on the history surrounding the LA Kings versus the Vegas Golden Knights. And I'm definitely chirping that. I think that's crazy that happened, but maybe he just got caught off guard, all the lights and the cameras, but I don't think so. I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but that just seems like a crazy mistake to make publicly.
I mean, we all live in our own bubble, right? But, I mean, come on.
I know. I'm trying to think of, like, any faux pas I've had that were similar and equally embarrassing, but I don't think that I could make that mistake, but who knows?
And then to cap it off, he said, well, there are two Kings in L.A., referring to his nickname, King James. So the L.A. Kings had no choice but to have fun with it on social media, and they tweeted out, quote, some roommates forget to do the dishes. Some roommates forget to take out the trash. Others forget you live there.
That is good. Okay, they're even then. That is a good one. Good on the social media person for the Kings. They deserve a raise for that one. That's hilarious. Big chirp for the King. I got in honor of Patrick Kane, doing the hat trick against the Toronto Maple Leafs in an exciting game. I think it's even more interesting to think about now because it was like Patrick Kane and somebody who means a lot to Chicago and Blackhawks fans. If there's a hat trick in a game, do you throw your hat onto the ice? Are you celebrating or are you chirping? That, because I personally am not a huge hat wearer, but if I had a nice hat, I don't think I would throw it. I've never thrown it, but I don't wear hats to the game. So it's kind of a hard question for me to answer. But Chris, I know you wear hats. You're a big hat guy. Are you celebrating or are you chirping the tradition of throwing your hat onto the ice after a hat trick, especially one from a future Hall of Famer and somebody who is Patrick Kane?
I celebrate the gesture. I think it's really cool. I think it looks cool when you see the replays on TV of all of the hats being thrown on the ice. I don't think, and you're right, I do wear hats a lot. I think for me personally, it would be a decision made in the moment as to whether or not I threw my hat onto the ice in a situation like that. it would also depend on where I was sitting. I mean, I'm only throwing it if I know it's going to land on the ice. If I'm up in the 300 level, I'm probably keeping my lid. I don't have a hat that if I threw it onto the ice in a moment of euphoria, I would miss. You know, I love my hats, but I could just easily replace it, I suppose. But I also, on the other side of this conversation, I don't think it should be incumbent. I don't think there should be any external pressure on you to throw your hat in a situation like that. Listen, if you want to throw your hat, go for it. If you don't, that's okay too.
Well, you answered both my follow-ups there. I was going to ask, like, if you thought you could reach the ice depending on where your seats were with your hat. And then, two, I would have thought maybe you had a special hat. So I was going to ask you, what would it take for you to throw it? But I'm kind of like you, where I don't really have a special relationship to any of the hats that I would wear to a game or a sporting event. So glad we're both on the same page here, Chris.
Definitely. And my favorite hats right now are my Blackhawks fitted hats, just with the logo and the flat brim. So, fortunately there's a good supply in the team store. I guess it would, set me back like $30-$40 or whatever. But again, it would be worth it if, I'm at a Patrick Kane hat trick game. I mean, I think that would be worth it. But again, you gotta really make sure that, because hats are hard to throw. I mean, they catch air and maybe don't go as far as you think. So you just gotta make sure you know what you're doing in a situation like that. So great discussion point as always, Kaylee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Back at you.
That's all we got for you today on this episode of the Blackhawks Insider Podcast. Our thanks, as always, to Brad Dollar and Southside Jake for the music featured on this podcast. Trevor Bray and Jenna Rose, our producers behind the scenes, do such a great job editing this podcast into a watchable format for you to enjoy or listen to. Again, more content always available at Blackhawks.com. Never a dull moment around this organization and covering the NHL. We'll be back next week for another riveting episode of the Blackhawks Insider Podcast. For Kaylee, I'm Chris. Thanks for tuning in.